My spoiled nieces kept stealing things from my daughter, so I put a lock on her room. They found the spare key and stole even more things. So I kicked them out and they were left homeless. My brother-in-law and his 18-year-old twin daughters live with us, and the twins have no respect for my daughter's privacy. The day they moved in, they went into her room and took her clothes. They only returned them after I pressured them. When I mentioned this to my brother-in-law, he didn't see any problem with it. My wife said the same thing, that it was just typical teenage behavior. The twins quickly became more invasive, taking my daughter's jewelry, her skincare products, and even her laptop. The last straw was when my daughter bought a $75 makeup kit, which she had saved up for. One of the girls took it without permission and ruined it. When I heard about this, I was furious and immediately bought an industrial lock for my daughter's room. When my brother-in-law saw the lock, he wasn't happy. He yelled that I was treating his daughters like thieves and that my spoiled daughter could buy a $10 makeup kit at Walmart. As soon as he said that, I wanted to go after him, but my wife stepped in and interrupted. She ended up taking his side, saying that teenagers always borrow things and that I should take the lock off our daughter's door. My exact words were, "Over my dead body." Well, it shouldn't have been a surprise that the situation got worse soon after. Despite the lock, my daughter's privacy was still being invaded. Somehow, the twins found the hidden spare key, which I had told my daughter to keep in case she lost hers. I still don't know how they did it, but one day, while my daughter was out, they broke into her room and took her laptop. This time, they left the clothes and the makeup. Hours later, they returned it, but the laptop was practically destroyed. The screen was cracked, the keyboard didn't respond, and it wouldn't even turn on anymore. When my daughter saw it, she completely broke down. That laptop contained months of college papers, projects she had spent nights working on, and personal photos she couldn't replace. She sat on the floor holding the broken laptop and cried, inconsolable and devastated. I stormed into the room where my brother-in-law was sitting, completely unaware of the damage his daughters had caused. I told him what had happened, hoping for some kind of apology or at least some acknowledgement that his daughters had crossed a line. Instead, he shrugged and said that they hadn't done anything wrong to my daughter and that's why you have to back everything up. He made it sound like I was the one who needed to do this, that I should teach her a lesson. I saw red. That accident had just erased months of my daughter's work. He had no idea what that laptop meant to her. She had saved up and bought it on her own, and now it was ruined. I told him his daughters needed to be held responsible. He said he would talk to the twins, but he was sure they didn't do it on purpose. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had spent weeks invading her space, taking her things, and now they had destroyed something irreplaceable. I told him he needed to fix this, because if he didn't, I would. After a long and heated argument, he finally agreed to cover part of the cost of replacing the laptop, acting like he was doing me a favor, as if I should be grateful that he offered anything. It was exasperating. The tension in the house increased even more after that. My wife tried to stay neutral, hoping things would resolve over time, but even she started to get frustrated with her brother's attitude and complete lack of responsibility. It was wearing her down. She defended him less and less, and I could see the exhaustion in her eyes every time we discussed the situation. Márcia and I knew we needed a vacation to get away from the disaster at home. So, Márcia, Cintia, and I went to a nearby resort for the weekend. When we returned from the vacation, we felt refreshed. The weekend at the resort was a relief from the chaos that had been our home. Márcia, Cintia, and I were able to relax and forget about the constant tensions with the twins and my brother-in-law for a few days. Cintia even managed a few smiles, although she was still sad about losing the laptop and everything it contained. She tried to look on the bright side. At least we were together and had a brief moment of peace. But when we got home, any sense of tranquility quickly evaporated. As soon as we walked through the door, I noticed something strange. There were suitcases and boxes in the hallway. When I went upstairs, I saw that my daughter's belongings were piled up in the hallway. My eyes widened in disbelief. When I opened her bedroom door, I saw the twins comfortably settled in, lying on her bed, with posters already on the walls that clearly weren't Cintia's. "What are you doing in here?" I asked, trying to control my anger. One of the twins, without even bothering to look at me, just snickered and said, "Oh, we thought this room was bigger, and since we were sharing the smaller room, well, we thought it would be fairer." Fairer. Was this how they justified invading my daughter's space and stealing her room? While we were away, I was in shock. Courtney, who was right behind me, stood at the door, her eyes wide and full of tears. She didn't know what to say. The two girls, without an ounce of shame, had taken her things and simply decided that the room was now theirs. I turned to them, trying to stay calm. "You have exactly 5 minutes to get out of here and return everything to its rightful place. This is my daughter's room." That's when my brother-in-law showed up, with a false calm expression and a sense of superiority. He walked into the room and stood between me and the twins, crossing his arms. "I think you're overreacting. The girls are just trying to adapt. They've been through a tough time, and this room really is bigger. I think it makes sense for them to stay here. Your daughter can very well take the smaller room." That argument made me see red. How could someone be so shameless? I knew he had been downplaying his daughter's behavior, but taking my daughter's room, which has always been hers, without even consulting us? How could he speak so coldly, as if Cincia's pain and privacy were insignificant? "Adapt!" I practically shouted. "The room is my daughter's, and you have no right to take it. She's already had her belongings stolen by them, and now her space too? Do you want to take everything?" Márcia arrived at that moment, trying to understand what was going on. I quickly explained, while Cintia just sobbed softly, and my wife looked at her brother in disbelief. "They can't do this, John. This is Cincia's room." He shrugged, as if what we did or felt didn't matter at all. "Look, the girls needed a better space. I don't see why this is such a big deal." Márcia tried to argue, but he was unwavering. The twins, behind him, kept looking at us with disdain, clearly enjoying the situation. They knew they were provoking us, knew they were crossing boundaries, and didn't care. I could feel my anger growing. With every moment, I wondered how far this abuse would go. My daughter, Cintia, stepped forward, wiping the tears from her face with the sleeves of her sweatshirt. "Please, Uncle John, this is my room. I just want my things back. I didn't do anything to deserve this." But before she could finish, one of the twins interrupted, laughing. "Oh, please, stop being dramatic. You're lucky you still have a roof over your head. We're just trying to settle in. It's the least you could understand." It was at that moment I realized the conversation was going nowhere. Márcia, exhausted and on the verge of tears, begged her brother to back down and leave things as they were, but he refused. He said the girls wouldn't go back to the smaller room and that they had more right to the bigger space than Cintia. I finally lost my patience. I told him that if things continued like this, they would have to find somewhere else to live. But he laughed in my face and said, "Good luck trying to kick your own family out. I'll make sure everyone knows what you're doing." I knew he was bluffing, but the cynicism and manipulation made me even more furious. I went back to my room while Márcia tried to console Cintia. The pain on my daughter's face was unbearable, and I knew I couldn't let this slide. I needed to find a way to get my daughter's room back and put an end to the disrespect that was destroying our peace. This situation continued to haunt us in the following days. The twins made a point of going in and out of Cincia's room as if it had always been theirs, while my daughter shrank in the smaller room, which was full of boxes and her belongings piled up. I promised myself I wouldn't let it stay like this. They may have taken one room, but they wouldn't take our home. I knew I couldn't let this situation continue. After seeing my daughter curled up in that small room, surrounded by her piled up things, while the twins took over the space that was hers, something inside me finally broke. I realized that I could no longer allow my brother-in-law and his daughters to keep abusing our hospitality, especially my daughter's dignity. It was time to make a drastic but necessary decision. The next morning, I called my brother-in-law for a serious conversation in the living room. Márcia was by my side, and Cintia, still shaken, watched from afar, hidden in the hallway. I spoke firmly without beating around the bush. "John, you and your daughters need to leave our house. You have 1 week to pack your things and find somewhere else to live." John's face turned red with anger, and he started shouting, saying I was being unfair, that we were being ungrateful after everything he had done for us. But I didn't back down. He tried to turn Márcia against me, saying she was his sister and had an obligation to help him, but she just looked at him sadly and said, "John, that's enough. This isn't fair to Cintia or to our family. You've crossed the line." The twins, upon hearing the decision, began to scream and cry, claiming that I was ruining their lives and that we just wanted to throw them out on the street. I simply responded, unfazed, "I gave you a chance, welcomed you into my home, and you repaid me by invading my daughter's privacy, taking her things, and now even stealing her room. There's no space here for anyone who doesn't know how to respect others. If you want a place to live, find somewhere where the owner tolerates this kind of behavior, because I won't anymore." They kept complaining and shouting for days, but they started packing their things. My brother-in-law said he would tell the whole family how cruel I was, that I was betraying the family bond. On the last day they had to leave the house, he made one last attempt to convince me to let them stay, saying I would regret pushing my own family away. I looked him in the eyes and said, "John, my family is Márcia and Cintia. You are relatives at most, and you have no right to interfere in how I run my home and take care of my daughter. You took advantage of our goodwill and crossed the line. I won't accept that, and that's why I'm making this decision." He was speechless for a moment, maybe waiting for me to back down, but I didn't budge. And so, that afternoon, they left our house, carrying their boxes and bags, still throwing insults and complaints, but nothing that made me reconsider. The sense of relief that washed over me when the door closed behind them was indescribable. John did what he promised, tried to slander Márcia and me to the rest of the family, saying we were ungrateful and that we had kicked him and the girls out for no reason, but I didn't care. When some relatives started reaching out, I was clear and direct. I made this decision to protect my wife and daughter. I won't allow anyone who doesn't live our daily life to interfere in how we run our lives. And if you think I'm wrong, you can keep your opinions to yourselves. I will keep doing what's best for my family. Few understood, many criticized, but I didn't let that shake us. Márcia and I decided to distance ourselves from all that toxicity, cutting back on contact with those who only wanted to judge without knowing the facts, and we focused on creating a peaceful and healthy environment for Cintia. Our priority was and always would be her well-being. The following months were full of peace and rebuilding. Over time, Cintia regained her confidence and started smiling more often. We bought her a new laptop, and I made sure to install all the possible security measures to ensure no one would invade her space again. Márcia and I also started feeling at home again, something that had been lost during the past months of living with my brother-in-law and the twins. Today, looking back, I know I made the right choice. Our home became a place of harmony again, where everyone respects each other's space and feelings. And I learned a valuable lesson. No matter who it is, I will never again accept disrespect toward those I love. If anyone tries to cross that line again, I will know how to act before it's too late. My family is my priority, and I will never again allow anyone to steal our peace. After we finally managed to kick my brother-in-law and his daughters out of the house, I realized it was time to make sure that this would never happen again. The relief of having them out of our home was immense, but I still worried about what they might do. The way they left, full of anger and resentment, kept me on high alert. I knew that, to protect Márcia and Cintia from any retaliation, we needed to take firmer measures. I started by installing security cameras at all vulnerable points of the house, covering everything from the main entrance to the back and the garden. I also put alarms on doors and windows, ensuring that if anyone tried to break in or force their way in, we would be immediately alerted and the police would be called. I hired a monitoring service that gave us the peace of mind of knowing there was always someone keeping an eye on things 24/7. But that wasn't all. Knowing that my brother-in-law and his daughters were the type who didn't accept no easily, I decided to go a step further and filed for a protective order against them. I gathered all the evidence I had, records of their privacy invasions, the destroyed laptop incident, my brother-in-law's veiled threats, and presented everything to the court. I was granted a restraining order that prevented them from coming anywhere near our house, our neighborhood, or any place we were present. Now, with the protective order in effect, any attempt on their part to approach would result in immediate arrest. I had no idea how much peace something like that would bring me. Suddenly, every day was no longer a constant battle. We no longer had to look over our shoulders or worry about what the twins or John might try to do. They were legally prohibited from tormenting us, and finally, the weight of that tension was lifted from our shoulders. Their reaction, as expected, was one of pure indignation. John tried to challenge the order, saying that I was overreacting, that he just wanted access to the family, but the law was clear. He couldn't come near us, and any attempt to contact us would result in immediate consequences. I knew he hated the idea of being so limited, but I wasn't willing to risk the safety of my wife and daughter for a false sense of family obligation. Some relatives, of course, still tried to interfere, saying that I was exaggerating and that we should work things out within the family, but I stood firm, as always. My priority is Márcia and Cintia. I won't risk their well-being to please relatives who don't understand what we've been through. If they violate this order, they'll go to jail, and that's how it has to be. Over time, even the relatives who initially criticized my decision ended up distancing themselves. It was clear that I wouldn't back down. Some resigned themselves and respected my stance, while others simply stopped trying. I preferred that, as it was a sign that we could finally live in peace. No external interference, no demands, above all, no feeling that we were always fighting to protect our own home. The months passed, and life moved on. Cintia finally regained her sense of security at home and returned to focusing on her studies. Márcia and I managed to rebuild the family environment we had longed for, without the tensions and misunderstandings that had tormented us for so long. The house became a place where we laughed together, where we had dinner without fear of interruptions, where every corner was a refuge of tranquility for the three of us. Today, I see that making this decision was the best thing I could have done. Our priority has always been and always will be our own family, and now there is no one who dares to cross that line. If anyone tries, they know they will face the consequences. I sleep peacefully knowing I did what was necessary. I chose to protect those who truly matter, and I have no regrets about that. The experience taught me something fundamental. Sometimes you need to cut ties with those who only bring suffering, even if we share the same blood. True loyalty lies with those who stand by our side in difficult times, not with those who only cause pain. Today, we are stronger and more united than ever, and I wouldn't trade that for anything in this world.